Sorry, I just need to. Good morning, honorable members and colleagues. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. May I check with Shanaz if we have any apologies?
Good morning, Chair. So the apologies that we received was from the Minister. He's attending to another event this morning. And then from the member side, we received apologies from Dr. Bosov and apology from Sibia. They're not able to, Sibia clashes with another committee meeting that she has, and Bosov's got party commitments.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Shanaz, for those apologies. Colleagues, this morning we will be receiving a briefing by the Department of Science and Innovation on initiatives and programs in support of climate change. And what we've done, because our colleagues from Environment could not join us as they are committed on their side. However, they did show great interest in having this, this joint committee meeting in the future. And we have duly noted the fact that we would have to have this, would have to postpone the joint committee meeting with them to a later stage. So what we try to do is to get more inputs from other stakeholders within our sector, particularly DSI, in relation to the work that they're doing in responding to climate change and ensuring sustainable development, considering climate change. And so we then will also have a presentation on access research programs, which will be led by Dr. Swede. I am so sorry. I can't wait for the doctor to introduce themselves so that I can learn how to pronounce your surname correctly. And sincerest apologies about that. So colleagues, we're really excited to hear on how the DSI swayed. There we go. Thank you so much. I think that is Doc, or that's an account from the institution. So yeah, we really are excited to hear from colleagues and to hear how the DSI is contributing to climate change through various innovations and research within or from the department and its entities. So I'd like to at this stage then hand over to DG Ndwaga, who I want to believe is on the platform. Yes, he is on the platform. Morning, DG, and over to you.
Yes, thanks very much, Chairperson. Just explaining how we're going to do this today. I believe we have just about an hour on our side and about an hour on access research program. So we're hoping at the DSI to just share 4 issues with yourselves. The one is the portfolio of the research programs, including access. So we'll probably not go into the details of that, and Imran Patel will do that. Followed by the program on waste research development and innovation roadmap that we have been doing over time, and how this will transition into the work of circular economy that is in the decadal plan, which Dr. Henry Roman will do. If by that time Dr. Mope has been able to move from another meeting of the NECI colloquium, between the two of them, they will decide who does that. And then thirdly, Dr. Rebecca Masremule, the acting DDG, or Technology Innovation, will talk about some programs in energy and agriculture, or showing how we can do things differently in those sectors. And then we would ask Imran to come back on how we broadly would like to intentionally ensure that science informs policy, and how we're framing this in the decadal plan, and then also on the how our work is contributing to the SDGs. So I'll load the presentation and then I'll ask them to speak. And then just a small matter on my side, Chair, is that I hope by 12 we'll be fairly close to the end. I need to run quickly to the airport. I'll still be able to listen, but I'll probably be driving, but I'm hoping to stay until about 12:15, which I assume is the time that you've afforded us. So we're grateful again for this opportunity, and I will then go straight to try and I've got two presentations. I hope this is the correct one. And then I hope it's the correct version, Mr. Patel. And let me go.
DG, yes, I think so. But if you can go to the start.
You okay?
Yes. Thanks, DG, and good morning to the honorable members and to other people who have joined this briefing session. I think the DG has outlined these four parts, so maybe we can move on to the next slide. DG, are you still? I can share the presentation if. Okay.
It's the usual problem. It's not moving.
Okay. Let me try to share from my side.
Okay.
Yeah. People able to see the presentation? I'll just show it in slideshow.
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
All right. Thanks. So I will do the first part and just give a bit of a history around the DSI's portfolio of work in the climate science space. Even before the 10-year innovation plan, the environment was identified as a priority for the science system. Support for environmental protection, etc., and environmental sciences was prioritized even in the first research and development strategy. There were some very specific foresight reviews that were done. But in a sense, the 10-year innovation plan lifted it. At the time of the development of the 10-year innovation plan, I think we were at the first peak of interest in the climate change in terms of the need for a response on a wide variety of fronts. But very importantly, the 10-year innovation plan, and we went through a lot of discussions and debates around this, which is useful for the portfolio committee to get the context. And we deliberately did not frame one of the grand challenges as climate change, but more as global change. And there's a reason for this. The view at the time, and South Africa was pioneering in this instance. I think we're one of the few that adopted it, global change as opposed to climate change, as a priority, because the understanding was that the climate intersects with a whole range of other environmental factors, whether it's water or pollution, etc. And from a scientific and action perspective, it's a lot more strategic to look at global change as opposed to climate change. But in addition to that, we had other grand challenges which in fact interfaced with the climate change work. For example, in the bioeconomy space, and some of that will be shared together. If we look at climate change as adaptation and mitigation, energy security is a key mitigation factor, and therefore we had a separate focus on energy security, and therefore the distinguishing factor of the Global Change Grand Challenge was the need to do this integrated work. I'm just going to show up all of the slides. At the time, we started by highlighting that the Grand Challenge needs to, in fact, respond to and support a range of other strategies, including the climate change response strategy, and that was then taken over by the response policy in 2011, the National Sustainable Development Framework, but also the industrial policy framework. And this will come out a lot more clearly when Henry shares how the Global Change Grand Challenge helped us to identify the waste and water innovations as a strategic priority. So in terms, the focus for me would be on the knowledge generation work that we've been doing under the Global Change Grand Challenge. This slide basically represents, and I will just quickly go through it because I will be speaking to each of some of the key elements around this in my presentation. But at the time of the 10-year innovation plan, we encountered the same challenge that we still encounter today, and which we've had many occasions to reflect on at the portfolio committee, or together with the portfolio committee. And there was the need to see how we can, as the DSI, bring leadership to a coordinated national program. There was a lot of good work that was happening at the time under Access and ION, other work, etc. But it lacked an organizing framework. And because it lacked an organizing framework, we were getting less than optimal impact in terms of what it needs to do. There was also a need to give directionality to the work, and I will identify those three areas of focus. So this, in fact, summarizes the different areas that we then identified that will provide an integrated response. So the key part around the knowledge generation was the finalization of a research plan in 2010. And that research plan adopted a systems approach, and it encouraged multi, and transdisciplinary approach combined with participatory research. We build on our national research and development strategy by continuing to take advantage of our geographical location, particularly in the context of what we call the Southern Oceans. The Southern Oceans is a driver and a determinant of climate change. And Access will speak to this a bit more. So in summary, this integrated plan then, and it came through a very a process of about 12 to 18 months where we engage with both the scientific community as well as the policy community to identify what are the key areas that we would focus on. And these 4 areas were identified. One is understanding a changing planet, which I will speak a lot more about, but the others will come through presentations by my colleagues. But we also identified the need to reduce the human footprint, and this, I think, catalyzed a focus within the DSI on the waste sector, which now has grown substantially and has become a priority through the circular economy plans that we're wanting to do. But we also identified the need to be action orientated, and therefore we needed to adapt the way we live, and we needed to look at the innovations for sustainability from a whole range of perspectives. And these 4 domains and 18 areas has informed our investment over the last 10 years. So what are some of these investments that we've done? The first, and I'm not necessarily going to go through this because we will have a presentation on this, is Access, the Applied Center for Climate and Earth System Science, kind of hubbed at the CSR, but includes a whole range of collaborating partners. And I think this would be be discussed in detail. Over the last 13 years, we've made an investment of about 200 million rands in this area, and there's a whole range of outputs that come out of that, which will be shared a bit later, including human capital development outcomes. Then we have SCION, and SCION predated the Global Change Grand Challenge. In fact, it came through the National Research and Development Strategy, where a need was identified for the DSI to focus on long-term environmental observation. So SCION, in fact, is the response to this. It has various nodes, and at these nodes, we focus on very different issues to understand environmental change. And this work that we've done under SCION feeds into a whole range of important international programs like ILTA or the Group of Earth Observations, etc. Our investment in this instance has been about 320 million rands, and that includes quite a bit of infrastructure support, because if you're wanting to do long-term environmental observation, research infrastructures are critical to that effort. That's SCION. Then we have what we call ION, which is the African Earth Observation Network that focuses on what I would call geological drivers of climate change over a longer period of time. This was a very successful program that kind of emerged with strong partnerships with Germany around some of these areas of work, and the kind of focus was on earth and life sciences, engineering, resource economics, and the human sciences. Shale gas, in fact, wasn't something that was common at the time, and earlier work was done by ION around shale gas. Again, our investment is listed there, about 100 million over the 12-year period. Sorry. And then we had SOCO, which is the Southern Ocean Climate Observatory. This is in a program at the CSR where we have kind of technologies, including technologies that were developed locally called gliders, the kind of equivalent of unmanned aerial vehicles in the sea, taking observations, etc., and understanding what I shared earlier is that we have these three oceans that is called the Southern Oceans that have been identified as a key determinant of global patterns of climate change. So this is more at the fundamental level to understand those links, and this project has helped to identify partnerships with others as well. Our investment over 11 years has been 140 million. And then we introduced part of what I didn't highlight earlier is that we had three kind of high-level outcomes that we wanted to achieve through the Global Change Grand Challenge. The first was to improve the science, and these are some of the efforts in that regard. The second was a very deliberate attempt, which is a lot more of a stronger theme now in the decadal plan, about how do we take the kind of scientific knowledge in a way that can help people who require this knowledge to implement this, and then I'll talk about SAVA. And then the third was to use this to catalyze new areas of innovation, and that's where Henry and Boneni will speak about. So the kind of flagship initiative around the science policy interface was what we call the South African Risk and Vulnerability Atlas. And the intention here was to provide a one-stop shop spatial data system aimed at equipping decision makers, a variety of them, but the very big focus was on at the local level, whether it's local governments or local role players, with the kind of information that will help them to identify the kind of risks and vulnerabilities that they encounter, and hopefully with that better understanding of risk and vulnerabilities to be able to take this forward. We also identified as part of our transformation objectives at the time that this kind of information is not something that anyone can go to a database and just simply get this here. It needed live, warm bodies to be able to work with communities on the data and what it means and how to respond to it. And what we had identified was a lack of this capability, particularly in kind of previously historically disadvantaged areas and within universities. So we then facilitated as a legacy project the establishment of what we call risk and vulnerability science centers. And these have both the Atlas and the science centers have really matured over time and have become an indispensable resource, both in terms of understanding risk and vulnerability, but also in terms of supporting local communities to respond to this. Our average investment is about 400 million a year. And then finally, we attempted to implement this thing called the Global Change Science and Society Research Program. And the intention here was through an open grant process to understand better the social ecological interface areas. So it's not just pure environmental research, it's environmental research that can support action. And we ran these calls, and there were a number of projects that emerged, and we can provide further detail through written reports that capture, because there's a lot of detail under this Global Change Science and Society Research Program. So in general, to summarize, what we've done through the Global Change, one aspect of this is to improve the fundamental science. The big initiative and investment was access, and hopefully you'll be getting a better sense of that work, but also in initiatives like the SAVA and ION were part of our investments. Thanks, DG. Let me leave it at that. I think I've taken about 12 minutes.
Yeah, please move to the next slide and then ask Henry to speak to you.
Okay, sorry. Henry, I'll help to direct, but let me. So, do you want to start?
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to be Henry for now. And then I'm going to have to, at some point after the presentation, go to join the panel on the NACI side. Just to really talk about the roadmaps that we've been implementing over the past couple of years. Two focuses with a focus on water and waste RDI. And the issue here is to improve waste management and water security, and to, through that, contribute to the green economy and the circular economy transition. So in the process, there were a number of initiatives that have been developed or established, basically mainly anchored at the CSIR and the Water Research Commission. And there we've got also various initiatives such as those that we're looking at the Water Technology Demonstration Program, which we refer in short as WADA, looking at transboundary big water data. And this is quite important because when you deal with issues of water and water security, it becomes very important to realize that some of this touches more than just one country. So it was important that, for example, at SADC level, there be a project that looked at the transboundary water big data program. And this was done in collaboration with USAID and covering the Southern African Development Community countries. And then the output that we're really looking at in order to also try and institutionalize this work was the establishment of research chairs in waste and climate, waste and society, looking at matters of e-waste. And this is really, as we go to the next slide, you realize the value of us as technology begins to grow and everybody has the gadgets and then we just dispose them off, how it becomes important to really begin to seriously consider the aspect of e-waste. And then, of course, the national guidelines for the integration of waste reclaimers into the formal economy. And in this regard, we just pleased that the work that we've been doing to understand, for example, how to integrate waste pickers into the formal economy, this work has actually been taken up by the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment into the policy through the development of the DEFF guidelines document for integration of waste pickers. So we are just pleased that we have been able to somehow work very closely and integrate the work and outcome of it with other government, sister government departments. So indeed, I think we are starting to see that the impact of this work is growing, both in terms of the development of human capacities and also where necessary establishment of the necessary infrastructure and programs that will support this work going forward. Next slide, please. So this is just now to zoom into the water RDI roadmap. And what is important really is in the understanding that we are actually a water scarce country. So it's not surprising that the bulk of our water resources are already allocated. And you can see that even though we are indicating that by 2030, the demand will have outstripped supply, the reality is that there are some parts of our country where the demand has already outstripped the supply. And therefore, there is a need to really continue to look at how do we develop human capacities to help us, both in terms of research, but also so that we can have a sense of what are the other newer and better coordinated ways that we can put in place to make sure that at least there is improvement in terms of the change of behavior around the use of water, bearing in mind about the impact of climate change. So I think the issue of making sure that we also have a faster and more comprehensive deployment of the context of appropriate performance improvements. So the issue really is that we need to make sure that we don't get hit by this water disaster without having prepared. So that's really what the water RDI is doing. And again here, as I've indicated, there's previously issues of skills, having research programs, research chairs, and also coming up with newer solutions, some of them which we are demonstrating, for example, through the WEDA program, on how best can we manage water and how best, where it is necessary, can we even implement technologies to be able to reuse the water. Next slide. So this is just to show the kind of projects that we have put in place, and really to indicate we've got already a total of 135 research projects that have been funded under the Water RDI roadmap, with 26 of those projects looking into the interface between the built infrastructure and the ecological infrastructure, and the importance of nature-based solutions to adapt to climate change is also becoming more of an issue. So we are hoping that with this and many more initiatives that we are going to be conceptualizing going forward, that we will somehow contribute to the body of knowledge and innovations that can alleviate some of the challenges that we're going into. Next slide. So just to indicate here, the focus has been looking on the catchment areas, working here, for example, with the entities such as the Transformation Innovation Policy Framework, and working in 4 strategic water resource areas. And here we're talking about the work at Umzimvubu, the Umgeni, Apachugela, and Bergrede. And this is really directly addressing the issue of adaptation through interventions directed at ecological infrastructure. And then, of course, in partnership with the Green Matter, establishing the Water Fellows Program, where we enhance the non-technical skill of the graduates to get them ready to be able to be part of the solutions. And in the next slides, I'll indicate some of the programs that really involves young employers in the municipalities. And here on the WEDA program, this is a program that I've indicated that we are working on demonstrating some of the technologies that can actually be taken up and used in various municipalities to address some of the water challenges. looking at 46 projects that have been demonstrated today. And this has really received a lot of support from the General Budget Support Program, which unfortunately is coming to an end. So we have, through this initiative, established a network of 34 test beds across the country. The technology demonstration ecosystem includes 4 water boards and 4 municipalities for demonstration under real conditions. So it's always important that when some of the solutions have been proven at the lab, working to ensure that we can actually show that they work in real life situations is quite important. So the partnership with the municipalities and the water boards is really quite crucial. And the issue of the establishment of the young engineers, just back to the previous slide. Yeah, the establishment of the young engineers change makers program. This is really aimed at municipal engineers, and it's a program that is very good in the sense that it targets the young engineers in the municipalities, and then they are taken through various skills programs. Some of them they have to attend training abroad, and we're pleased that I think this is really beginning to build a cohort of young engineers in municipalities who are
Okay, so it's not my network. All right.
We've lost Dr. Moape.
Okay.
We've lost Dr. Moefe, so I'm not too sure if Henry wants to continue.
Yeah, I suggest you move to the next slide and Henry can take over.
Thanks, DG. I see Dr. Moape is back, but he's still muted.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I got disconnected a little bit. Thanks a lot, Henry. So this slide just shows the focus of the projects, and they've been color coded just to simplify your reference to this. So these projects that are demonstrated under WADA will focus on sanitation, rainwater harvesting, smart applications, energy efficiency, alternative sources of water, reducing losses, and water quality. And we know that we've got a big problem around water losses, either through leakages and so on and so forth. So this program is quite helpful in that regard. The next slide. So this is now transitioning from water into waste. And the waste RDI a roadmap, again, also similar to the water one. We've been on this for the past 7 to 8 years. And our biggest problem, of course, is that the bulk of our waste just end up in landfill. And there is a whole impact in the economy because some of it is really missing out on the opportunity to reuse some of this through various economic activities that can result, for example, in employment creation and so on. There is also an impact around health and environment when we just ship stuff into the landfill. And so we really are working closely with various municipalities to make sure that we can introduce various programs. And again, looking at aspects of R&D, skills development, and various innovations that can help create value out of waste. And one of the references that we made in previous slide is how we are beginning to see the creation of employment through waste. For example, the waste pickers that have been supported, and the development of some of the programs that I think at some stage Dr. Henry Rollman could talk more about, looking at the development of what we call enviropreneurs. So these are people that are based on, entrepreneurs that are based on environmental issues, some of them including waste issues. Next slide. So this is just to show what we have done so far in terms of human capital development. And these are people at different areas, some of them having come through the research chairs, some just postgraduate students under coursework and so on and so forth, and some being those that are successfully completing their degrees. So we are seeing that we also have a lot of knowledge that has been generated through publications, and that, which is important, that the top 5 countries accessing the waste RDI roadmap website, just to really share what we can do. And we know, as we go to the next slide, that there are areas of concern in terms of waste that we have to really address. And here, looking at aspects, for example, of biomass and food, a whole lot of what we consider to be waste in various biomass producing sectors, whether it is forestry, whether it is other forms of agriculture. The reality is that when you look at forestry, for example, I think it's less than 30% of the whole biomass that is actually used. The rest is discarded as waste. And what we're looking at here is how can we make sure that we improve the use of the whole biomass to a much higher percentage. And this again means that you are creating value, having products that can actually address other issues. Some of those products actually being useful in the areas such as drugs manufacturing and so forth. And then the issue of food. Here on the food, there are very many other things that can be done, but most importantly, in a country where there are many people who are going to bed without food, and there is so much wastage again of food, we really need to look at how best can we come up with programs that will help us to deal with it. And we have highlighted there a number of projects and project leaders that are looking into various aspects to help us take value, create value in the biomass and food waste space. The issues of plastics, we probably hear a lot about the dangers of plastics on the waters and seas and so forth. And this is really one area that we're beginning to focus on. There are projects, for example, that are looking at development of biodegradable plastics, and also a big project looking at the use of non-biodegradable plastics, for example, in road constructions. So these are really initiatives that are beginning to show to us that, yes, it might be considered a waste, but on the other side, we can actually be sitting on the minefield in terms of the potential that waste can bring in the economy, both in terms of employment creation and also economic value. Next slide, yes. So the issue around circular cities, and here it's about, for example, how do we begin to working with various cities, look at the issues of management of waste in a manner that encourage circularity. For example, we know that in some cities, I know in the city of Johannesburg, there are programs that already looks when you talk about the waste in residential areas, the separation of those that can be cycled and those that cannot be cycled. So there are a number of projects again that we are funding in this area, whether we're looking at incentives for municipalities to divest waste from landfill so that it can be used for other purposes. The issues around electronics waste is quite crucial, because there, when we dispose this, a whole lot of these electronics are actually some of them manufactured from rare earth minerals, and reclaiming that for reuse is going to be quite important. So we therefore are looking at programs to do that. The issues around when you dispose of our cell phones with the lithium-ion batteries, how can we reclaim those so that they can be reused? So that is really quite important, and also making sure that by reclaiming these things, we also are able to clean up our environment, because some of the waste from electronics can be poisonous. Next slide. So this is again, just like we have in the water RDI roadmap, we've got various such research chests that that are really looking at the issues of waste and climate, and also waste and society. And again, this is quite important because again, when we realize that a lot of what we are wasting has got huge impact again in adding to the challenges that we have in the area of climate change. Next slide, please. The issue of circular economy, very much linked to the previous one, is really just about how do we move away from just going out, and if it is in the area of mining, mine things and then use and then throw away. And this is really what we call the linear economy. So you extract, you use and throw away. But in terms of the circularization, we're beginning to say, how can we make sure that whatever we have used, when it reaches the end of its life, it actually begins another cycle into other economic activities. And in South Africa, approximately 7% of our staff is secularized. And as you can see, of the 875 metric tons of materials extracted, 327 metric tons end up in waste, and only of that 221 are extractive waste. So the reuse is going to be quite important, and we are seeing it in various areas where value is being created by reusing materials. Next slide. So this is really just an example of DSI input into the socio-economic inclusion. We have mentioned the work that we've done in the issue of the waste speakers integration guidelines, and that this work has actually now been taken up into the policies of the DFFE. So this is really quite what we are beginning to see, that yes, slowly but surely, there is starting to be an appreciation of the secularization of the economy and embracing of its impact on socio-economic inclusion. Next slide. And I think that then concludes the contribution that I will be making at this point. Thanks.
I think the next slide is supposed to be these. So Rebecca, if you can take these, then I'll come back to the earlier ones. Rebecca?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Honorable Chair, members of PPC. I'm going to focus on two areas of focus, energy and agriculture. If you think about climate change, energy sector is responsible for most of your greenhouse gas emissions. So the reason why you have this 2 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. And then the agricultural sector is going to be one of those sectors where adaptation activities need to occur. Otherwise, we're going to have issues with food insecurity issues. We're going to have challenges with job losses. The first part is really talking about those projects that we have in place. In most cases with private sector, where we're really looking at reducing or mitigating greenhouse gas emissions in South Africa. The first such program is what we call the Coal Seal to the X program. So I know there's been a lot of discussions around the production of green hydrogen, green ammonia, and the export to other countries. But also we have a domestic use for green hydrogen in the short and long term, and that is really in terms of producing what we call carbon lean products. So we're looking at capturing what we call flue gas from coal-fired power stations, as well as other industrial facilities that use coal-fired boilers, such as cement sectors and so forth. And then using that flue gas, using with the green hydrogen to actually produce products. So this will give us two things. It'll allow us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions over time, not necessarily reduce the reduction of the coal mining sector, but do the repurposing of power plants in such a way that it makes sense to us, but also it allows us to create export market. We have a project with PPC Cement in Dombom, which is in Limpopo province, where we're going to actually have a demonstration of the capturing of flue gas from a cement kiln and PPC cement, and then reacting with hydrogen to produce fertilizers in other projects. Next slide. Now, in terms of the decarbonization of transport, so we know you look at the industry sector, which is responsible for a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions in South Africa. The second sector that's really important is the transport sector. And most of that is really in terms of the road sector, which is, I think, responsible for 98% of your greenhouse gas emissions. Now we have our energy RDI program and energy storage. And most of our infrastructure is really focused on 3 institutions. At the University of Limpopo, they have a special campus in Nelspruit and Mpumalanga. There's a campus at University of Western Cape where they have at the SIMAC, or the South African Institute for Advanced Materials and Chemistry, or SIMAC in Western Cape. And then in Nelson Mandela in Eastern Cape, we actually have a program that we're supporting, UGILO, the battery program in Port Elizabeth. And this is a spin out of the JOE program that was funded by government for quite some time. So we know that the move from a internal combustion engine to lithium-ion batteries is what's happening globally. By 2030. I think in Europe, you're expecting to have a serious phase out of ICE. And the question is, what does that mean for South Africa? You know, what role do we play to deal with this, these changes globally, which are going to impact on our automobile sector? So we do training of students in these facilities, but also we are around assisting private sector with the uptake of innovations in South Africa around this. Recently, we took unemployed TVET graduates, and in partnership with First National Battery, we're actually training unemployed graduates towards participating in just energy transition. And those students, after a 6 to 12 months program, will actually be absorbed into industry for full-time jobs and so forth. So this is what we're doing in transport. Next slide. And in terms of transport, again, we're also looking at, so on the other side, we're looking at battery electric vehicles, but now we're looking at fuel cell electric vehicles. So we're looking at reducing emissions in, again, the road sector. So we're doing work with South African Post Office to try to help them to green their fleets. And we took a battery scooter and we converted it to fuel cell using technology, or HISA IP, that was developed at University of Western Cape. So in the on the left-hand side, you see a picture of the fuel cell scooter. I believe some of the PPC members were at the UWC and have seen this in the facility. And then on the right-hand side, you see a demonstration we did with Impala Platinum, where we took materials handling equipment and converted it from diesel to fuel cell. This project has been running since 2015, and this is really showing how, again, you can use locally developed IP to actually start converting vehicles that use diesel and petrol into fuel cell technology. Next slide. And then in terms of the electricity sector, now we don't necessarily have technologies in the PV sector that we have deployed successfully, but in terms of the Renewable Energy IPP program, we have 2 spin-out companies, one from Nelson Mandela, the other one from Stellenbosch University. The first one, Geosun, has been participating in the REAP sector by doing studies and assessments of the capability, the assessments for power, independent power producers that want to deploy in South Africa. And this company has really grown over time. I think at some point in time, I think 3 to 4 years ago, they had at least a 10 million rand turnover. It's been growing over time. And they actually have customers in the rest of Africa, Middle East, and South America. So this is a situation where you can take graduates from our research programs and turn them into directors of companies. And the second company, PV Insight, they do a lot of research, a lot of work for, again, IPP programs to assist them with the sustainability of their deployments. They do testing the modules, and they assist them with ensuring that their facilities are working up to standards based on what they have to provide for the IPP office in South Africa. Next slide. And then last but not least, we have technology we've developed in partnership with Stellenbosch University. This is what you call CSP, or concentrated solar power. And this is really looking at, again, taking South African IP. And the great thing about this is that you can actually deploy the technology. You can, again, we're working at not necessarily just deploying technologies, but seeing that as part of the just transition, can you have technologies which are easy to deploy and reduce the level employee to a blue collar worker to participate in the renewable energy sector. And in terms of this is, again, look, not necessarily big scale solar, but really mini and micro scale grid connections for South Africa and other countries and other countries in Africa. Next slide. So the slides for agriculture did not go through, but in terms of our programs around agriculture, we have a number of programs. We have first the Climate Resilience Consortium program. This is where we funded about 10 million, in part 10 million from DSI and then 10 million from industry. And what this project is doing is really looking at ensuring that the potential devastating aspects of climate change and variability do not start affecting food and nutrition security in South Africa. So in this, we've had the consortium has been put in place to ensure that as we grow crops, we can do it sustainably despite the increase in temperature. So what we've done is we created a knowledge base on the effect of climate change in agriculture in South Africa. And so what this does for us is allows you to provide information and knowledge to farmers to ensure that they are they can plant better. So one such instance is the window in which you plant your seeds. If you don't follow the correct planting window, you're going to have losses, especially with the prevalence of droughts and other issues coming up. And then also, I think in terms of shifting the planting window for maize production, which is an important crop in South Africa, we've done it by collecting data to ensure that we can have climate change prediction models to ensure that we can make better decisions around planting and harvesting in South Africa. In terms of other platforms that we have to assist the agricultural sector to be more resilient to climate change, we have an agronomy platform to develop research expertise, looking at summer grain production in the region to investigate how, again, climate variability and ensuring that we have more resilient systems. This is work that we're doing in the Eastern Cape, looking at maize hybrids to reduce the impact of drought and heat stress on maize crops in the Eastern Cape. And then the last but not least, we have a strategic flagship program on wheat breeding. I'm not sure if you guys recall that with the challenges in Ukraine, there's been a lot of discussions worldwide around the concerns around the wheat crops coming out of Ukraine. This has huge impact for Africa, which actually is a net importer of wheat. South Africa spends plus or minus 5.5 billion rands a year. Kenya spends about 2.4 billion, Mozambique about 1.5 billion rands a year on wheat, the importation of wheat. So what we've done is, in order to increase our resilience towards climate change, but also to reduce the imports of wheat, we have a wheat breeding platform that over time has created 30 new cultivars since 2015 in the program. And this work, I think, is one of our key programs. We're doing work with ARC, Stellenbosch, Grain South Africa. And what we've done is to, again, reduce the, to support farmers so that their wheat crops are climate resilient and pest resilient as well. So I think that is the last slide in our presentation. Floor back to you, Imran.
Thanks, Rebecca. Just three things I want to do because I think we're almost at the end of an hour. The first was to kind of highlight an initiative that again is focused on not only environmental change and environmental challenges, but goes beyond that into infrastructure and transport. And South Africa has been a kind of a founding member of the Global Earth Observation Systems, which has been in place for more than 15 years now. And through that global effort, there's a lot more coordination aimed at bringing together a whole range of observation systems, whether these are satellite-based or hot air balloons or in situ systems, etc., and to create a platform that allows these different observing systems to then support what we call societal benefit areas: health, disaster, energy, climate, etc. So we've been an active participant in this, and the South African research community has made valuable contributions to GEOS some of the work that we are benefiting from this participation. The second part is, DJ, I'm not going to go through the links to the SDGs. I think people can read that, but just to end off by giving an indication of how we plan to move forward. So, I mean, as the honorable members would see, taking a broad-based approach to climate change and its impacts and its understanding, etc. There's a whole range of initiatives that we've put in place, from the understanding of the basics and the fundamentals of how things are changing, to a range of technology areas that we're advancing. You know, there's work here that we haven't included that looks at for example, the human and social sciences as an example. So these are quite a full range of initiatives. What we're wanting to do as part of the decadal plan, and particularly these societal grand challenges, is to, in fact, even further enhance the coordination between these different programs and then bring together a much more stronger emphasis on outcomes. And part of these outcomes are in fact defined by what is happening in the external environment. So the big area of focus at the moment, say on the climate change space, is the whole just transition framework that has been adopted by Cabinet a couple of weeks ago. And that just transition framework makes provision for a whole range of science and innovation areas that needs to be strengthened. And currently we're working very closely with the Presidential Commission on Climate Change and the kind of stakeholders that are part of the Presidential Climate Change Commission to identify what are the priority science programs and innovation programs and application programs that we need to be strengthening over the next decade. And to ensure that, and this is something that the Portfolio Committee has highlighted continuously, is to do it in a way that allows us to secure co-funding and co-support from a whole range of players, whether this is industry players or part of the climate financing that would come together. So as we move forward, we will be not neglecting the kind of existing work that we've done, but the summary line, even with some of the investment numbers that we've put up, is that the belief is that we're still spending not as much as we should be for the kind of challenges that we have. And the only way to enhance the resource pool is to be able to work a lot more closely with a whole range of partners and make sure that we build on that partnership approach, the budget coordination approach, and to find the resources that then supports the science and innovation that can help with the implementation of the just energy transition. Like I said, I think this can people can go through it because it's a kind of repeat of some of the work. So DG, just on that basis, I think we can end the presentation, our presentation.
Yeah, thanks very much, Imran, Rebecca, Moneni, Roman. So, Chair, that's where we'd like to end. We hope we were able to do it within an hour. If we were delayed, thanks very much. And we've probably given, in certain instances, too much detail, but you hope you got a sense of the work that we're doing overall, from science and research all the way to pilot programs and an attempt to make sure that we provide solutions to mitigate against climate change in certain areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DG, and to colleagues from the DSI. I'd like to now hand over to Dr. Swade, I believe, who will lead the colleagues who will share more information on the Access research program.
Good morning, Chair. I need sharing rights, please. And I think Imran needs to stop sharing his presentation, please.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yep.
Facilitate that, please.
Imran, can you stop sharing your screen for me?
Yes, just give me a chance. Yeah, all right.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much. So good morning, Chair and members and colleagues. I'm Neville Swade. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Carl Palmer, and two of our students, Aliyah Shah and Shibutiso Maluleke, who are going to share this presentation with me. Thank you all very much for this opportunity. What I'll do is just give you a short background about the program, a quick overview of what we're doing and what we've done. I want to drill down a little bit with some examples of the science that we're doing, and before that, just give you a little bit of theory. Then our two students will represent our HCD efforts, which we felt was more appropriate than us telling you about them. We'd get our students to tell you about them. Then we'll make some conclusions and take any questions and that you might have, and Dr. Palmer will be here to do that. So thanks very much. Just as a way of background, so Access as a program of the Global Change Grand Challenge of DSI begun as a center of excellence some 12, 13 years ago. Subsequently, the Global Change Program Office was established at the NRF, and then Access became a program after a review of the NRF, and that's where we remain. We are funded through the NRF from DSI, and it is hosted at the CSIR, and as I said, it's been running for about 12 years with 3 phases of research. To describe this to you, we've effectively had these 3 phases. The first establishment phase was to develop interinstitutional and multidisciplinary research in a thematic way related to the Global Change Grand Challenges science plan. And from that, we developed our own research focus, which I will describe later with the examples on the annual cycle and seasonality theme. And further beyond that, now we have developed our 3rd phase. We have a consortium approach where we've created consortia of different institutions and partners focusing on particular research questions, which I will describe. We have a lot of international collaboration and consultation with the science community and some outreach, as well as our education and training in the form of a research postgraduate and Habitable Planet program, which our students today will describe to you, as well as a short course curriculum to help our research students develop particular skills that they need. Just some illustrations on the slide. On the left is the high carbon concentration facility at Rhodes University, which we've invested in, and DSI has also invested in, and some of the research that has come out of that. So I just want to say, as an overall kind of introduction, we've produced over 200 MScs and PhDs from this program, and we are nearing 350 publications in international and regional and local journals from the work that we have done. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about some of the research themes and research programs or sub-programs that we are operating. The second phase was focused on a theme which we called the Annual Cycle and Seasonality Program. And I'll again illustrate to you why the seasons and the changes in the seasons are really important. We have another 2 major projects which are currently being operated as an outcome of that, with a focus on extreme events, and I'll explain again a bit more about that. One is a program which is a marine science program looking at extreme events in the Benguela upwelling system, and this is a regional project with external funding from the Belmont Forum, including Angola, Namibia, and South Africa. So that's up our west coast. And the other is a more terrestrial program looking at extreme events and its impact on different sectors. And again, I'll pull an example out for that in a moment. So that's the kind of broad overview of the kinds of research that we've been doing. I just want to mention before I get into more detail about some of our international work. So we have several international relationships and in different ways. One I want to highlight is our almost decade-long, in fact, more than a decade-long relationship with Japan, facilitated by DSI, which has been highly productive, looking at being able to forecast the seasons. So like we have weather forecasts for regular weather information. We can also now we're developing tools to look at what kind of season we're going to have. Is it going to be hotter or drier, etc., than average? And then we apply that in various fields. And this is an example from medical application where we have developed systems to start to estimate what kind of malaria season we might have, or what kind of diarrhea season we might have. And so we're producing, as a result of this research, bulletins on a regular basis to do this. And out of this collaboration, we've now established in South Africa with the South African Weather Service, we are developing a bureau which is going to look at making regular forecasts of infectious diseases called the IBUS Bureau. And we are developing a research alliance with the key stakeholders being the South African Medical Research Council, South African Weather Service, and the NICD on research around the impacts of climate variability and change on health. So there's some science outputs and some institutional development that is coming out of these international relationships. Another thing I want to point out is that the science we're producing from this is really making waves. We've got some really high-level outputs on malaria prediction, for example, based on data we've collected in South Africa and analysis we've done both in South Africa and in collaboration. And that's just an example of some of the science outputs that have been published. Another example is around COVID. And you'll recall that when COVID arrived in South Africa, it was towards the end of summer 2020. And at that stage, we didn't know anything about it. And we know that our flu season is in July, in the winter. And we were very, very concerned at that stage that what might happen is that our epidemic in South Africa would be much worse than in the Northern Hemisphere, in the Southern Hemisphere in general, because we were going into winter. And so we put together a group of people, both locally and internationally, to look at this question of what the seasonal effect on COVID might be. And we actually published the first review paper internationally on the effects of seasonal drivers and climate drivers on COVID. And together with our international partners, we had an international conference which we hosted online at the time. It was opened by our minister with the World Meteorological Organization, and even got a mention in the very renowned journal Nature on this event. So that's just to illustrate some of the kind of international connections we've done with this work. In addition to that, what Access does is it organizes the community around particular issues of climate and climate change and climate variability. So you'll recall that in 2015-16, there was a very big El Nino event, which is a global climate phenomenon.
Hi, Felicity. Can you come up? I wanted to stop.
Sorry.
Apology, Dr. Sway. Let me just, okay, there we go. You may continue.
Okay, no problem. So we had a big El Nino event in 2015-16, and you all also probably recall the day zero drought in the Western Cape. And what we did was gather the science community together with partners to investigate what we knew about these events and what the likelihood of various scenarios around these events would be. So we do that as well as the research is to really organize the science community around these issues. During the lockdown, when everyone was focused on COVID, of course, climate change and climate impacts continued. And so we held a series of international meetings. We got the best people in the world who were all sitting at home to participate in a whole range of online events dealing with some of the global issues which pertain to us, such as the California wildfires, ocean acidification, melting of the ice caps, some of the politics and some of the economics around climate change, which we also held. So this sort of illustrates the broad range of activities that we do. And now what I'll do is just drill down a little bit. We've just submitted a report to DFFE, which was run by Access and the University of Stellenbosch, to look at climate services. And I want to stress this is really, really important, is that we need to be able to produce information and knowledge that is usable by society. And so the World Meteorological Organization has created a framework for this called the Global Framework for Climate Services. And South Africa is busy implementing such a system at the national scale. And what we've been looking at is how to do this and looking for funding models for this, in particular around the sciences. And why this is important is because, as you will all know, this year has been particularly impactful in terms of the impacts of climate change around the world. We've had, for example, the KZN floods. We've had these incredible heat waves in Europe, this unbelievable flooding in Pakistan, the huge wildfires in many parts of the world, Australia, US, Europe, even here in South Africa. Currently, there's this 4-year-long failure of rainfall in Somalia, leading to an extended drought and famine. And these are all extreme events that are happening around the world as a consequence of climate impacts. In South Africa, we've had many of these, as you'll recall. I've mentioned the Day Zero drought, the persistent drought in the Eastern Cape. Remember the Knysna fires and Johannesburg flooding. And in order to deal with this, what the science community needs to do is to produce information that's usable. And this is really what our broad aim is. And we need information at different time and space scales. At the long term, we need to know what will the climate and the weather be like, what will be typical and normal in years to come. What will next season be like? Will it be worse or better than before? What will it be like in 2 weeks' time for other events? What about next week? What about in the next few days? And in events like the KZN floods, we need to know on an hourly and even shorter term timescales, what's happening with that cutoff low right now? Where is it going to rain in the next half an hour? Those are the kinds of information we need to be able to produce. So it's seamless at all different timescales for application in operational or tactical or strategic thinking. And really, that's ultimately what Climate Services seeks to do, and why this matters to this particular portfolio committee is because we have to answer this question: how do we organize the science for delivering the climate services at those time and space scales, and very importantly, observations, and who pays for what part of it? So we need to know what satellites do we need, where do we need weather stations, how often do we need to collect this information? Is it at 5-minute intervals, hourly intervals, daily intervals, et cetera, et cetera? And we have to keep modernizing as things change in order to be able to collect this information accordingly. Okay, so what we're doing as an example with the climate and health side is to develop this end-to-end system from the observations right through to the applications. So what do the medical fraternity need to know about climate that affects particular diseases? And then they need to report back so that we make sure that the climate scientists are producing the right kind of information. And that's why we focus on interdisciplinary sciences. That's what Access tries to do, is to get players from all different disciplines to work together on these questions. So I'm going to now move to a little bit of theory just to orientate you around the examples I'm going to give you. And this is from a paper published a couple of years ago, very important paper, actually an Australian paper. And there are 3 lines, a green, a red, and a blue line. And that green line represents the seasons over years. So there's several years, and you can see this could be temperature or rainfall, and it goes up in summer and down in winter or whatever. And it's a very noisy signal, and no season is like any other season, but it's a fairly regular seasonal signal. We're all used to that, winters and summers. The red line are extreme events. So this is a measurement of some extreme. It could be temperature, it could be rainfall. And we have every now and again, we have these events. And they are natural. They occur naturally at a particular frequency or intensity. And the blue line is the average climate. And as you can see with climate change, that is trending. It's moving slowly upwards. And if you combine those 3 lines together, what you get is this black line. And this black line, you can still see the seasons, you can still see the extreme events superimposed on those seasons, and you can see that long-term trend. And why this is important is because it illustrates how the changing signal from climate change manifests in seasons and it manifests in extreme events. So we are seeing the changes to our seasons, and the extreme events which are superimposed upon them take us into new records that we've never seen, at least in human history, before. And those extreme events can cause damage that we can either recover from, or in potential cases cannot recover from. And that's really what this illustrates. One more slide on theory. This is the same kind of concept. You're looking at a blue line. That blue line represents any kind of climate signal. Could be temperature, could be rainfall, and it varies from season to season as we move through time. The red lines, if you look at the top panel over here, the red lines represent what we are used to. Those are our adaptation thresholds. So we know more or less what kind of weather to expect in South Africa, for example. And so we are adapted to it. The stippled line illustrates what an economic disadvantage does. So if you are poorer and don't have the resources, your ability to adapt to the extremes of what we can call average weather is compromised. And we see this especially in informal settlements where people can't cope with what might even be normal ranges of winter and summer. In the second panel, here I illustrate the extreme events when we exceed those adaptation thresholds. And in KZN, we saw that happening. That's a typical example of an extreme event where we go beyond what we are adapted to. And so there's a big impact on our society. And again, if you're poorer, your ability to cope with that is compromised. And at the bottom panel, you can see those red lines sloping inwards. And they're doing that to illustrate the point that what we often do is we build in harm's way. So we build dwellings and houses in the floodplains of rivers, or we don't manage the runoff properly. And when that happens, the extreme event impact is much greater. And again, we saw that happening in KZN, and it affected poorer people more because they had less resilience and less ability to cope. So those are the principles, the theory behind why seasons are important and why extreme events are important. And so what I'm going to do now is to give you one example. Then I'll hand over to my colleagues to tell you about the HCD program. And if we have time, I'll come back and give you a second example. So here in this example, using transdisciplinary science, we are looking at data that we've obtained from Clicks Pharmacy. And this data is data on the sales of loperamide. And loperamide, you might know as Imodium. It's an antidiarrheal medication. It's cheap, it's over the counter, and it's a really good measure of the incidence of disease. And if you look at the sales, so this chart on the left, it shows you the sales of loperamide over a number of years by month. And you can see the black bars are showing you that it peaks, and then there's a trough and a peak and a trough and so on. And what that says is that this is a very seasonal disease. It's really a summer disease. Although we do have diarrhea in winter, it's much less than in summer. And those colored lines are showing minimum and maximum temperature. So in summer, we get more diarrhea than we get in winter. And this is really useful. Also important to note is that each summer sales pattern is different. And if you look on the right-hand side, this is just a line to show the relationship between temperature and sales. So we know when it's warmer, we have more diarrhea. Okay, that's the message from this data. And if you look at the pattern of this around the country, it's really interesting. So on this chart on the left-hand side, this 0 position is the annual long-term average. And so it shows that in January, February, and March, it's above that long-term average. And then in the winter months, it's below the average. And then later in the year, when summer begins again, it goes above average. So we can see clearly that it's a summer disease, and a very important disease, I should add. It kills more children than any other disease, this diarrheal disease does. And as I was saying, we have different climate zones in South Africa. And if you look at the same story of the sales of loperamide in Gauteng on the top and the Western Cape on the bottom, you can see there are differences in these patterns. And so what we're doing is studying this to understand what's the relationship like between climate variability and climate and diarrhea incidents in different parts of the country in a multidisciplinary way, in order for us to be able to predict, if we can say to you, next season is an El Nino year, it's going to be hotter and drier than normal, we can expect more diarrhea, and we can be quite precise about doing that. And that's an example of how we use the science in an application. I've got a little bit more on this example. So what you're looking at here are 4 maps of the world, and you're looking at the sea surface temperature, and where it's red in color, it's above normal for that time of year, and where it's blue, the sea surface temperature is cooler. Now, the sea surface temperature is really important in driving the atmosphere. The bottom right is, if you like, right now, and then we go back 1 month, 2 months, and 3 months at the top left. And what I want you to look at is this little red patch of sea surface temperature off South America. You can see it starts a small patch of red, gets a bit bigger in 2 months, gets even bigger in 3 months, and at lag 0, it's a very big patch of red. And what this map is showing, and I haven't got a more illustration of this, you have to take my word for it, it shows that there's a correlation between the sea surface temperature in this red patch of water and the sale of loperamide over the counter at Clicks in Polokwane. I'm going to say that again. So this, the redder the water gets, the sea surface temperature gets, the more people are buying Imodium in Polokwane. And why is that, you would ask? Well, the reason is that this is a signal of the El Nino. When this sea surface temperature signal is a very typical pattern of the El Nino. The El Nino is a global event. It affects climate all over the world, including in Southern Africa. And when we see the signal of El Nino coming, we can predict a whole lot of things, including the fact that we're going to get more diarrhea in Southern Africa. One more slide on this example before I hand over to my colleagues. This is the same data set, except now I'm just doing it by week. Okay, and we start on this left-hand side. There are 4 circles in this chart. This big circle in the middle is an outbreak of diarrhea, which happened in 2012-13, which we do not believe is related to climate. We think it's a global epidemic of a new or novel virus that may have caused it. But there are 3 other circles I want you to look at. This one on the left-hand side happened in a winter year of 2010, and that was the Soccer World Cup. And we think that this was caused by a whole lot of travel of international people to South Africa. The other 2 are very important. This one here, which I'm circling now, happened right around the country, whereas this second one happened mostly in the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. And if we move to the second chart, there are 2 color bars here. The red one shows the whole country without the Western Cape, and the blue bars are just the Western Cape. And all I want to show you is that although the rest of the country had this event, so did the Western Cape. But the last event over here on the right-hand side, this only happened, or mostly happened, only in the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. And what were these 2 caused by, these outbreaks? Well, this was the El Nino of 2015-16, which was hotter and drier than normal. And this one here, which was the Western Cape event, was really, the outbreak started almost on the day that level 6B water restrictions were imposed, and people stopped using water. And so hygiene and sanitation was affected by that. And all this shows is that we need to look at these problems in a very interdisciplinary way in order to be able to make predictions which are useful for society. Okay, so I've told you a little bit about what Access's history is and a broad scope of what we do with one example. I want to also say that we do a lot of work in education and training. We have our postgraduates, as I've described, doing research, of which we've produced over 200 degrees. But we also run an undergraduate program, and I'm going to hand over now to Alia and Shivu, who are going to tell you about this program and its history and what it's achieving. So Alia, you're there, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neville. Good morning, all. My name is Alia Shah, and I'm speaking to you from KwaZulu-Natal. I am a master's student at UKZN, but this morning I am here as the Deputy Chairperson of the HPW Planeteer Representative Committee, which is run by HPW alumni and represents all students of the program. Shivu?
Good morning, all. My name is Shivutiso Maluleke. I am an alumni of the University of Limpopo and studied my master's at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I am currently in Pretoria and I am an intern at OMI Solutions. This morning, I am here as the Dumisani Ndaba Award winner. Thank you, Alia.
Thank you, Shivu. Next slide, please, Dr. Neville.
Okay.
At Access HPW, we recognize two great challenges. The Habitable Planet Workshop is a program of Access and is funded by the National Research Foundation and the Department of Science and Innovation. Firstly, there is the universal challenge of producing sufficient postgraduate science researchers towards the knowledge economy. Furthermore, there is an even greater absence of Black women who are science students and science researchers. And the colonial and apartheid imprints in South Africa meant that a large majority of the population was deliberately excluded from science access and science education. This unfortunate legacy continues and poses several barriers to success, with many young Black women still being deprived of the opportunity to engage in science research and science education. Secondly, we are on the brink of a climate crisis, which will undeniably become catastrophic if there are no prompt changes. Next slide, please. The Habitable Planet Workshop offers a unique approach that uses science education to tackle both those challenges. The HPW approach centers around several significant observations. In South Africa, where so many people are already facing unacceptable living conditions, telling them that the future will be worse is not constructive, nor is it inspiring. Another crucial observation is that the South African environment is a unique and incredible place for furthering science research. By instilling and inspiring a Southern African perspective in young South Africans, the HPW approach focuses on the idea that these young South Africans have the capabilities to make a significant difference, but their energies and capabilities need to be harnessed and unleashed by offering them a platform to do so. Next slide, please, Dr. Neville. This platform to unleash the potential of South Africans in science is governed by HPW values, each of which I will quickly unpack. The first value is development through science and ties back to the idea that young South Africans already have the capabilities to improve their situations, but lack access to opportunities to do so. This also focuses on equipping individuals with transferable skills that will increase their chances of employment. Inclusivity means that all individuals have access to science. The participant does not incur any costs, meaning that they are able to join the program regardless of socioeconomic status or background, and all disciplines are invited to apply, facilitating a transdisciplinary environment. The content is taught by previous graduates of the program who have been specifically trained to deliver science content to their peers, facilitating the notion that young South Africans can teach and learn from each other. The fourth value encourages individuals to learn from questioning, as it acts as a bridge between taught learning and learning through research by introducing critical thinking. Lastly, the program uses an Afrocentric approach to generate pride in the uniqueness of African environments and African identities, all while decolonizing science education, as students are taught Earth system science through a Southern African perspective. Next slide, please, Dr. Neville. The table you see on your screen is termed the hierarchy of models and forms the basis of the HPW curriculum. The journey begins with Dr. Carl Palmer setting the scene of planet Earth as a bare rock, and with every lecture that follows, the trained peer educators add a layer of complexity that builds a picture to describe what makes the Earth habitable, all while investigating why South Africa is such a special place in our habitable planet. I will now hand over to my partner and HPW Excellence Award holder, Shivutiso, who will offer more details on the program.
Thank you, lovely Adia. Now, the HPW program mainly focuses on the undergraduate workshop. Now, this undergraduate workshops is a 10-day workshop which takes place 3 times annually. It takes about 50 plus minus 50 participants, and it takes place all around South Africa. Well, we've been all over South Africa except for the Northwest, and I'm sure we'll be there in future. Next slide, please. Besides the undergraduate workshop, we also have a schools outreach workshop. This is what we call the mini HPW workshop. This workshop takes students so that we don't only have an impact on undergraduates, but we also have an impact and participation from students or learners in high schools. Now, this program has graduated about 500 learners thus far. Next slide, please. Now, I have told you about the undergraduate workshop, and I've also told you about the students, high school students workshop. Now, in order for us to make sure that we have peer learning, we now take these students who have been previously been part of the workshop to go and give lectures or run workshops in both undergraduate workshops and schools outreach workshops. We take them under to go through training, which is the student lecturers training. This training takes students to be able to go and give lectures in undergraduate workshops. We also have a schools outreach training, which takes students to be able to go and run schools program workshops. Now, besides these 2 workshops, we also give planeteers an opportunity to have a more hands-on experience in running the workshops, whereby we get them to go through project management training. This project management training makes sure that the students are taught or trained to be able to manage the program, to plan and run the 10-day workshop program. Next slide, please. Now, we all know that because of COVID, the past 2 years have been very intense. We couldn't meet publicly and we couldn't have meetings. Therefore, we couldn't have our normal physical and winter workshops. In order to combat that, or in response to COVID, we have come up with what we call the far apart science learning. Now, this first workshop is an online workshop where we take students and they go through an online workshop, which is about 2 to 5 hours in a day. Now, this workshop, we realized that since it's online, that means we can reach people who are further apart from us, which is why we have been in partnership, or we have had participants who are coming from Ghana, Cameroon, and Nigeria, and India. Besides the first program workshop, we also have the online course. Now, in this online course, it is similar to the 10-day winter workshop, but in this one, we make sure that we include everyone, which is why we are trying to get inclusivity into it. So we have as many participants as they are willing to apply. In this year's course, we have registered of 1,200 students, and we would really like to have some of you to be part of this workshop in future. Next slide, please. Now, Aliyah, the lovely Aliyah, has told you what the aims of this workshop is. I mean, we are trying to promote women to be more involved in science programs. We are trying to get more Black students to be involved in science, and we are trying to get more students to further their studies and becoming master's, graduate, and doctors. Now, have we as HPW, are we doing that? And the answer is yes. We can look at the stats. Now, looking at the stats, we've had more than 60% of the participants in the program being women. We've had about 99% of them being Black students in the last 3 years. We've had 1,500 Planeteers who have graduated thus far, and we have 2 times the number of Planeteers who study further. This is 2 times more than the annual, or rather the national stats. And also to show that this program is, participants or students really love this program. In 2022, we have had participants who have rated the program 9.8 over 10. Next slide, please. Now, we don't only have the stats, we have testimonials from the students who have given us feedback about how they feel about being part of the program and what impact the program has had on them. For example, we have Utokozani Mangezi, who says, I am inspired and I wanted to see myself as Dr. Carl in the future. And I feel like if I run the sports program in Eastern Cape, a lot will change. We've also had feedback from Mela Ramolala, who says the practicality of how the workshop was run is so also inspiring. We had our peers giving lectures and speaking to us at the Careers Cafe evening. HPW is truly innovative and unique. All I can say is keep on doing the great work. Now, it's not only the students who HPW has had an impact on. I personally also have improved a lot with my public speaking. I joined the HPW in 2017 as an undergraduate. I graduated and became one of the lecturers where I had an opportunity to go and give a lecture in Zimbabwe in 2018. I've also had an opportunity to be part of the LOC and run and plan a workshop, a 10-day workshop. And today I am a master's graduate because I was inspired to study further due to the HPW. And I'm even working, which is something great. Aliyah, could you please give us how you found HPW?
Amazing, Shivu. Thank you. If the girl I was when I initially joined the program could see me now, she would be in complete awe. HPW has granted me the opportunity to transform from a timid, shy, and sheltered undergraduate to a confident master student who has realized that what I have to say matters. And through its unique and innovative approach to Earth system science, not only have I learned science and gained career guidance, I have learned leadership, project management, a love for the country that I call home, and the responsibility to pay it forward to other young South Africans. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Neville.
Thanks very much, Shivu and Aliyah. I'm going to bore you with a bit more science before we finish. I've just got one more example of the research, which I thought is an important illustration of what we do, so you can get a proper sense of it. And this refers to this project which we are running up on the West Coast. And the basic question we're asking is, how are extreme events in the coastal regions and the ocean affecting people and livelihoods? And we have 4 sub-projects, one of which is taking place in Cape Town. And it's with Transnet. It's looking at the Cape Town Harbour. On the top panel in the photographs, you will see what the harbour looks like now. And at the bottom, you'll see what the port is planned to look like. It's our third most important port, but it's our most important port for the export of fruit around the world. Now, there's a problem in Cape Town from extreme events. And if, for those of you who are familiar with the southeaster in the Western Cape during the summer months, it blows so strongly that in fact the port can't cope. And this has become such a big operational problem that there's even consideration about moving the port or downgrading the port because of this problem. And so we've been engaging with the port around this particular problem. And what I wanted to explain to you is why it's such a big problem. Because there's a value chain from the shipping lines who make their own decisions. And if they can't make port, they won't, and they'll move to the next port, adding costs to transport of containers. There's shipping operations, getting pilots on board ships. There's getting ships to berth in the harbor. And these ships move around in the wind and in the waves, making offloading and loading them much more difficult. Stevedoring companies who earn their income from moving cargo have to stop operating because it's very dangerous to do so in high winds. And all of the subsidiary businesses that service this industry, and ultimately the consumers who are exporting and importing goods through this port and other ports in this country are affected. And all of this comes to a grinding halt in extreme wind events. And so we need to understand this problem. And what you're looking at now is a chart in hours per month of hours lost in this 24/7 operating port in Cape Town. These are the number of hours that are lost to the port because the port can't operate due to extreme wind. It's not only extreme wind that causes problems, but this is just the extreme wind data. And it's a problem so much so that it seems to be getting worse. It seems to be more intense and more consistent towards the last couple of years. And so we decided to look at this problem, but look at it from a focus on fruit. And what you're looking at here is a value chain in the fruit business. So the farmers around this region produce all our deciduous fruit. It goes through a long process, through our port, into a foreign port, and then to the consumers wherever they may be. But the choke point in this process is often in the ports. And this is what we are dealing with. And here on this chart, on the left-hand side, what you're looking at is the weeks of the year. The beginning of the year is here. And this is when the number of containers of fruit are plotted, and there are different kinds of fruit. But what you need to point out is that it is in the summer months that the fruit exports peak, which happens to coincide with our windy season. And so what we are doing is asking the question, what is happening to that wind? Is the wind genuinely getting worse? And if so, what are the climatological reasons for it? We know why the wind blows, but we don't know why the wind is getting more extreme and consistently more extreme. So we're looking at this from a climatological perspective, and we have a PhD student working on that. We are also looking at the economic impacts of this extreme wind. So when the wind does cause the port to close, what does it cost the economy? And we're looking right down that value chain. And we have a student who's working on that as well. And then we have an engineering student who's also a staff member at the CSIR looking at potential solutions for this. And again, I wanted to use that example just to illustrate to you that there is a meeting place of different disciplines in trying to understand this. As Imran was talking about earlier about global change, it's not just climate change, it's looking at the climate and its impacts down the value chain right into our economy. Good. So this is my final slide. I just want to say in conclusion that I argue that Access is a valued and successful and continuously evolving program. And we are very, very grateful for the opportunity to be able to implement this work. And we owe much gratitude to our colleagues at the DSI, the NRF, and the CSIR. And we are also deeply indebted to our many, many partners and our students. And with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swade. Can I check if the DG, and to all the colleagues from the Access program, Can I check with the DG if there's anything that he'd like to mention? I know he said he's going to leave at some point, but I see he's still here.
Yes, I'm still here, Chair. No, nothing to add. We hope we have given a full bouquet of what we're doing. One of the things that I still want to raise with Neville, which he knows very well, we really appreciate the attempt to get science into policymakers, but this is a conversation we're having with them to say, how can we do a lot more? One of my ambitions would be town hall meetings in Cape Town, in Gqeberha, in Durban, as well as here in Gauteng, where the access program with the NRF public engagement engages society on some of these issues. So we are well aware that we are not where we would like it to be, but as Imran indicated, this is where the decadal plan wants to put more emphasis on how do we enhance that program. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you so much, DG, for that. Thank you so much, colleagues, for that. This was really exciting. Also to hear from yourself, Dr. Swade, and to the young women who've accompanied you. I think it's not a secret that in this portfolio committee, you know, we are always pro inclusivity and representation. And so, you know, having young women come and present on the work that they're doing at the Access or through the Access program is really exciting. Dr. Swade, I see your hand has gone up. Let me just take it quickly before I allow for members to make their input. I'm not sure what the hand is for.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that we would like to invite the committee to participate in our activities. I think our students would benefit tremendously from direct engagement with some of the policymakers such as yourselves. So we really want you to participate in our activities, but also encourage you to register for our online course. It's only a couple of hours a week, and I'm sure you'll find the time, and I'm sure you'll find it very interesting. So just wanted to make that offer and request. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Swade. One of our colleagues, who's a content advisor, Renee, was already saying she wouldn't have minded to be one of your students. So I think the uptake on going through some of those qualifications or online courses that you're speaking to could be quite high from colleagues of the portfolio committee. But thank you so much, colleagues. I think as I note the hand of Honorable Litzia, and he's been eager to contribute because he's traveling to Lesotho and doesn't want to lose network. I think one of the great things that came out, particularly from Dr. Swade's presentation, I think your slides around, I think that at the top of the slide itself, it said little theory or a little theory. And I mean, that's how you explained, for example, the relationship between diarrhea or this virus that, you know, is prone to affect children with the symptom of diarrhea and the weather. That was such an interesting insight for me. And immediately when I saw that, the question was, what type of relationship do we then have with a department like the Department of Health, in ensuring that this research that we are doing, goes through to the work that they are trying to do as a department, and even their doctors, their clinics, their hospitals, and how that type of information flows right down through the system, so that, you know, if you are having, you know, these, I don't know, I'm picturing a clinic in rural South Africa, rural KZN, and there are moms who keep on bringing their children complaining about the same symptom. How quickly are we able to make sure that that information, that research that we are doing is translating to that local clinic in rural South Africa to be able to quickly intervene in a scenario like that? And of course, this again, DG, which is not a foreign conversation to this committee, reinforces the fact that we need to integrate and invest in science and innovation in various departments and spheres of government. And where there are those units that are working on research and innovation in the different departments, we really need to have greater investment financially to resource and aid those spaces. And I mean, for example, still on this matter of the little theory, if I understand Dr. Swade correctly, when he says the indicator, or well, how I understand is that the indicators show us what type of weather we should expect in South Africa. And I guess my question there then becomes, how far do those indicators under that slide on the little theory allow us to predict? And then when you, for example, articulate the fact that, you know, the material conditions of the various communities that we live in, or the class realities of the different communities that exist within South Africa, will have an impact on that community's ability to cope with the various changes to climate. And this for me speaks directly to then human settlement and spatial or town planning or infrastructural planning. And with an appreciation of what what Minister, but she does want to be a doctor soon, what Minister Kubai always says in terms of how she refers to the Department of Human Settlement as not about housing, but about settlement planning. And I think that there then becomes a direct relationship between our, I don't know, our predictions, our forecasting in terms of climate changes, and how we then plan on the settlement of citizens in this particular country. And I know that we have indicated that, you know, that's something that we're really struggling with as a country. And it's an area where we are aware of the work that the Department of Science and Innovation is doing in influencing that space. But I really think that we need to see greater work being done in that regard. But those are just some of the inputs or views that one has as they've been listening to the engagements that have been put forth. Again, you know, Shanaz really raising the importance for us to attempt to have these joint committee meetings with, you know, I mean, already we've spoken to human settlements, we've spoken to health, and at least we've already had a meeting with health. Yeah, it really emphasizes the importance for us to be having these joint committee meetings. Honorable Itzia, let me let you go through before your network disconnects. And then can I please see other members who would like to engage? I see Honorable Yabo's on the platform, Honorable Mahlati. We've received an apology from Honorable Sibia and Honorable Mananiso, who are sitting in other portfolio committees this morning, and Honorable Boshoff, of course. Honorable Itzia.
No, thank you very much. Good morning, Honorable Chair, to yourself and fellow colleagues. Good morning, the DG and the capable team of DSI and everybody with different programs and those who have present. I think let's first acknowledge proper presentations that have been made today. I think, Chair, you would have covered me on the issue of representation, especially with young females coming to present and all of those things. So we're extremely happy. I think, Dr. Swade, if I did not have a lot on my plate, I was definitely going to join your class. And this is not me running away, but this is me just saying, you know, I was chatting with the chair on the side when you were presenting, and I was saying to the chair, Dr. Swade explains what can be seen as a complex situation and makes it so easy. So, I mean, I would really, you know, love to be one of your clearly, your pass rate is also good. I mean, some of us only want to enter programs where where we know we're going to pass, and with the explanation or the lecturing skills that you possess, I'm sure I would have been the first one to join your class. But unfortunately, because of time. But I think the last point you make that maybe we must find a way of interacting with your students. You know, will assist them a great deal. I think, Chair, let's look around, working around our schedule to make that happen as soon as possible. Okay, on the example that Honorable Mukaja spoke about, where Dr. Swade, you looked at clicks in different seasons and all of that, with that example of what do you call it, diarrhea sickness, whatever. Today, I think in Cape Town, okay, you also spoke about the World Cup scenario, looking at the number of those who got sick, what might have been the case, and all of those things. Today in Cape Town, we have had 2 World Cups starting: the Rugby World Cup, the Rugby Sevens World Cup, both male and female. Are you also going to be observing the trends there of different kinds of sicknesses and all of those things? And if yes, how long will the study be released, or the results of observing those things be released, so that at least you have an idea of what really happens during a big event like that one? Is it maybe some of them come from the Northern Hemisphere, they're in the South? Sometimes I know myself, if I travel, the first day or two where I get into a different environment, I'm not myself, I get sick. It's either allergies and all of those things. So how long will the results of that observation take? I think on the DFFE presentation, with all the strategies and plans pertaining to climate change that you gave us here today, give us an idea of how well are they coordinated, all these plans and strategies. Do we have structures that coordinate these things with possibly different portfolio, different departments and all of that? And do we have or is the true impact of these various instruments well understood by those who are implementing and those who are using, you know, end users? And has the true or full impact of any of these instruments been realized? And then you spoke a bit about the climate change bill. How will that draw these various instruments together? Or will the bill make some instruments redundant? If yes, to the latter part of my question, which instrument will be made redundant? And what are some of the key aspects of the climate change bill, and how have this been received during the public comments phase? How well has South Africa fared thus far in securing climate finances? And what are the key challenges in securing the investments? And how is the finance managed and coordinated here in the country? Maybe lastly on DFFE Chair, the COP27, which will be held later this year, I think in November in Egypt. What are South Africa's and the broader region's priorities for this conference? And what are some of the country's key statistics in relations to GHG emission? And have we determined or finalized our NDCs? And to DSI, with the reframing of the GCGC in the decadal plan? Will the research teams and the knowledge trust of the GCRP be changed as well? And what lessons learned during the implementation of the GCRP informed the new framework under the new decadal plan? And then maybe lastly, what has been the approximate total investment in 10 years of implementation of GCRP? Those would have been the questions, Chair, but I think it's extremely important to drive a point home that every time we get presentations from the department, shame they never disappoint. They come well prepared, straight to the point, simplify presentation. I think they understand the role of presenting to the portfolio committee extremely well. I think maybe soon, Chair, we might need to host a workshop where the department might need to assist other departments with putting together proper presentations. Thank you very much. That was on a lighter note. Thank you very much.
Hey, Jim Joacha, Honorable Itzia wants you to be unpopular with your fellow DGs, huh? But thank you, Honorable Itzia, for that input. I don't see other hands from members. Okay, I see Honorable Yabo. I would have been surprised, Honorable Yabo, if you didn't input, because I know that this space also excites you. So I'll take Honorable Yabo now.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I've been struggling a bit with my network reception. I think I've been kicked out more than 3 times already. And I've been clamoring to get back in each time. But I would want to make the point that I think I would be one of the foremost advocates for this department becoming a transversal department and probably being located in the presidency, because it feeds into so many aspects of our daily lives, so many aspects of government, so many departments work would find resonance within its work and be affected by some of the work that they do on the daily. And so probably if it's taken up as an apex department, we might see our country head towards a growth trajectory in many other aspects that puts us on par with the best in the world. Having said that, I want to appreciate the presentations that have been made. I will, however, focus on one specific presentation. I think Honorable Letsie has gone at length to speak on many of these presentations, if not all of them. The circular economy is a point that interests me in ensuring that we create an almost zero waste economy, making sure that some materials that are deemed as waste, especially within the mining space. I know that there are efforts taken currently by private business to utilize slag in its various forms, ferrochrome slag and other forms of slag, which have until recently been classified as waste. And only recently, I think early this year, a gazette was put out to declassify slag as waste and make it a material that can be used in particular in construction, and producing other materials that can produce economic value. And I think there needs to be an outcry made to take the short routes in ensuring that materials that can be utilized and become economically viable in their own right should be promoted as such and should be classified as such in growing the circular economy. And I mean, it's a worrisome factor that we are only 7% circular as a country. There is so much more ground to cover. And I would want to encourage the department to keep growing in that field, to highlight it to the powers that be, including ourselves, of course, that the circular economy is the way to go in ensuring that we grow many other sectors where jobs can be created, where economic value can be produced, and profit even made from what used to be termed waste products. And this is what I think fascinates me with the circular economy. The fact that you can develop spin-offs, economic spin-offs from what used to be deemed to be waste. And the scientific work and the seminal work being done in that space needs to be applauded. Like I usually say, credit needs to be given where credit is due. And the department yet again demonstrates to us that it has really put its shoulder to the wheel and its hands to the kiln. And this is what we want to see with all other departments that are service delivery oriented. And so the comment I wanted to make, Honorable Chair, is the comment around the circular economy and further studies being put into the work of making sure that we move from 7% to greater percentage heights, if I may use that term, in becoming a fully on circular economy. Thank you very much. That's what I wanted to say today.
Thank you very much, Honorable Yabo. Okay, I'd like to believe those are the only questions and comments from members. Let me hand back to DG. I mean, DG, there are other conversations that we would have wanted to have that I think are a bit more political, and I think, you know, we would want to have these conversations perhaps with the political leadership present, and maybe even with definitely with our colleagues from environment here. I mean, issues around some of the international agreements that we're part of and the policy trajectory of the country in relation to climate change and our posture on those matters. So those are conversations that we would like to have when different colleagues are available. And we, of course, would love for yourselves as a department to join us again when we have those particular conversations. But for now, those are the inputs from ourselves. And I think also, DG, just, I don't know what analyses or research maybe some of your entities have made. So we have, like, we're very trendy human beings. We like trends, right? So at some point, like, everyone was talking about renewing, recycling, and, you know, reusing, and it was a big thing in schools and in households. You walk into a household and they have different dustbins. And I think when we push it through the schools, what happens is that then children have these projects that they must do, and then they go home and then they create these, you know, dustbins, and then it's a project that starts at school, but because it comes home, it becomes a culture at home, right? But it doesn't become a sustained culture. We used to have days where communities were, I don't know, encouraged to go and pick up litter and everything must stop because today we're picking up litter. And we've stopped, but I don't think the issues around, cleaner environments and of course we can, I'm using these examples, but through the research that you are doing, there could be other ways of which we can be more impactful. I mean, when you look at e-waste, for example, do we have a drive that says, can everyone just check in their households how many chargers no longer work, and then what do we do with that? So of course, over time, conversation around dealing with various forms of pollution, in creating sustainable environments and addressing climate change and the rate at which our climate changes. It's multifaceted, and therefore our response as communities can be multifaceted. But maybe through these town halls that you do plan on having, we can raise awareness to communities on how multifaceted the conversation is and what they can be doing. Because look, it's all good and well for us to focus on departments. That's very important. There must be that level of intervention in terms of this type of work. But even in our homes, in the culture that we have, and when you look at, for example, COVID, there's a lot of good lessons that COVID came with. I mean, I take the one for masks. How do we inculcate a culture of saying, in South Africa, when you have flu, when you're sniffing a bit, just put on a mask, like forever. Like, I think it could, I don't know, Dr. Swade, you can tell us, would it work in terms of lessening the spread of the type of flus we see maybe during change of season, or when winter starts or the peak of winter, whatever it may be? But could that assist us? I think it could. But we are just Nompendulo, who has a mere BSc in geography, and we all agreed at the midterm review, DG, that you'll only become a scientist when you have a doctorate in some sort of scientific qualification. So I'm just Nompendulo, who has a BSc in geography. But how do we say, okay, sanitizer works, and sanitizer keeps us less sick, and let's just all sanitize and let's just all wear masks? So how do we, I'm making an example of COVID now, but how do we get past the trend and inculcate cultures of sustainable livelihoods and sustainable livelihoods? I think that's, I don't know, I hope that's the right term to use. And one option, of course, DG, is these increased awareness programs that we're always encouraging your department to roll out, but also these town plan conversations, town hall conversations that you were referring to. I think that's it from our side, DG, and so we can hand over to you and your colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I'm going to perhaps request Neville to start on some of the specific comments, questions that were asked by Honorable Letsie, and then ask Imran if he would like to add on 3 or 4 questions asked also by Letsie. The total investment that we've made, how do we coordinate the programs so that they are coherent, and the impact thereof, as well as if he knows anything about where we are with the climate change bill. I don't have the facts with that. And then if Roman is still around, Henry, if you could respond to the request and the ambition that Honorable Yabo is asking of us, and then I'll come back to talk about a few things around your theme, Chair, around science to policy to public engagement and those kinds of issues. But Imran could even start to talk about our thinking within the decadal plan on how to take that forward. So Neville, shall we start with you, please?
Thank you, DG, and thank you, Chair. I'm just going to throw up a couple of slides, other slides I just want to use to answer. The first is this slide. The question that member Letsie, Honorable Letsie, asked is really a medical science question, and it's a great question, and I think it's a great research project idea. And the answer to your question directly is no, we're not looking at the rugby sevens, but the idea of international events bringing diseases is really important. That's how COVID came here. That's how it spread around the world. You'll recall that our first case was someone who'd been traveling in India. I mean, in Italy. It was in Italy that they'd come back from. So the answer is we're not looking at that specifically because it's not a particularly climate-oriented question. However, it's a really important medical question. And what we do is in that interstitial space between the medicine and the climate. And I just wanted to focus on this. This is the plan for the climate services. And one of the important areas is this UIP, user interface platform. And I just wanted to give you an idea of why it's so important that we have multidisciplinary sciences in all the different sectors. So the idea of just taking the health example, this is repeated in agriculture, in transport, in various different sectors of the economy. But the idea is to organize those user communities, such as the medical community, with all the role players, including the research and the private enterprise and the Ministry of Health, et cetera, to organize them around these questions so that they can decide, what do we need to look at? Like you were saying, what do we need to observe, both medically and in climate, in order to answer these questions? So it's really, really important that we organize our various government departments and our various sectors to be able to interact with each other across disciplines. And the National Adaptation Strategy of DFFE does speak to that idea. So that's one answer. And then
people, ordinary people on the ground were responding to how they change their own behavior and whether they go out and among certain communities when you have festivals, etc. What's the impact on this? You know, people change their behavior based on them getting data from particular places. So I think that we've identified that is part of the area. We need to continue strengthening. We need to be, but at the same time understanding how we do this here. So that this process is underway, and that's part of your question to say, as we moved from the Global Change Research Plan into the decadal plan, what informed that change? And clearly, it's multifaceted. The kind of emphasis on environmental sustainability and climate change as opposed to global change research, because I think the one thing we've learned as well is that you need to approach these things in a systemic fashion, as what's his name, Neville had clearly identified when you're looking at the kind of ports in Cape Town. You need to think about it holistically. And so part of what we need to look at holistically under the environmental sustainability is the question about how do we make communities more resilient and more sustainable. And the environmental understanding is one part of that. The work we need to be doing and supporting on the research side may go beyond the understanding the environment through things like the Risk and Vulnerability Atlas to actually response measures. How do you help people? What kind of institutions, networks, responses you put in place? How do we strengthen our national disaster responses to some of these things? How do we manage long-term change? So for example, if communities know that certain areas are going to get drier over time, how do we start assisting those communities to migrate to say, drought-resistant crops, etc. So the focus is going to be quite different as we move forward. We're in the early days around that, but as the DG has been emphasizing, and we've been emphasizing at all presentations, and I think this is where Honorable Yebo's comment comes in. We still need to master the art of interfacing effectively with other government departments and ensure that the scientific enterprise is not just the DSI, but it's the DSI working with other organizations, and we have a clear sense of what we need to strengthen and what they need to be able to do. So we are part of that process, and we're taking it forward. So I think over the course of the next year or so, we will be able to come back and we are firming up some of the changes in direction or strengthening certain areas. I don't like to say making the move, because my view is that we can't be taking away from one place to another. We need to be strengthening all places, and that's why we need to put more resources into it. So it's how to manage that effectively. How much have we invested? It's a very difficult question without all of the details. I tried to signal in a sense, but I think over the last 10 years, we've invested between 600 and 700 million rands if you exclude energy, but you include the work that we've done around waste and water and fundamental science and access, etc. But that's over a 10 to 12 year period, and maybe some of the research infrastructures and some of the research chairs, etc. So we can, if there's a need for this, it's not easy to get this data. We've been trying. We need to also get it for ourselves, but we can give a better estimate around this. The question though is that enough? And I would say for the kind of impacts that we've shown, which we're trying to do, a 700 million rand investment over 10 years, the question we need to ask is, what did that 700 million rand do in terms of value? And without having hard numbers, I can confidently say that there's the kind of value that was generated was 2 or 3 times what we invested in a whole range of measures. Less impact in terms of a disaster or a better science or human capital development, and those young people then go on to move to productive careers and pay taxes, etc. is a very difficult number to calculate, but science always has a return that's bigger than this. So in summary, we are now making that transition. The big emphasis is not necessarily going to be only on topics, but also on approaches, and also making sure that there's a lot more strong interaction around the science into policy. And this is where we are also quite grateful that over the last 6 months or so, we've really strengthened our interaction with our social partners, whether it's labor or community-based organizations. So we had a very interesting engagement with community-based organizations at NEDLAC, and they were telling us of a whole range of projects on the ground and want to work with us to see how can we make the link, how can we link access up with other initiatives or some of our other investments. So a lot more of our emphasis is going to be on that linking up, and the scientists who are well placed to do this, like Neville and others, will continue helping us on the science. As a DSI, we will emphasize and focus our energies on ensuring bigger impact. So DJ, I hope I've answered. On the bill, I'm not too sure where that is. I know that the Just Transition Framework has been approved, but the bill I'm not aware of at this point in time where the climate change bill is. Thanks, DJ.
Thanks very much, Imran. Is Roman still around? On the comments of how can we raise the ambition on the circular economy?
Yes, DG, thanks. I'm still here. And thank you to the Honorable Yabo, and good morning to the honorable members of the Portfolio Committee as well. I think the first thing I want to say in answer to the question is the purpose of a circular economy is really to keep our resources at their highest economic value as long as possible in circulation. So yes, waste is a great starting point for a circular economy, but it only targets 12% of what we extract in our economy as an extractive economy, and that includes food, feed, minerals, metal ores, and coal. So if you're only targeting 12%, only focusing on waste management will not make the transition to a circular economy. In order to make that transition, you need to reconfigure your resource flows right through the economy. And the purpose being you're trying to design out waste. So you're designing products that can be recycled or reused or repurposed. And on the continent, repurpose and reuse of goods is how most of it is already going in a circular direction. In terms of the 7% circular, that is based on incomplete data for South Africa. And to note, the global average is 9.5%. So we're not doing that badly. The number sounds very low. Sweden recently released their number and they had better data sources. They reckon they're only 2% circular. They've got a lot of work to do as well. In order to amplify the ambition, I think what we may need to consider is how we put together an intergovernmental working group on circular economy that builds out the low carbon economy ambition from the NDP. And perhaps we put a target here at 2050, as most people have put that as their ambition for zero carbon emissions. It would be a good target here to look at, because the transition of an entire economy it cannot happen too quickly because of the repercussions that you may encounter. And I think that is key when we're looking at this, because like I said, it looks at many things, and the delisting of certain hazardous materials like slag that was mentioned is very important if it can be reused. Recently, fly ash was also delisted as a hazardous waste, so it can now be reused or repurposed, especially to the cement sector, because ash has good concrete properties as well. It also contributes to a number of things. If you're looking at at circular approaches to things, it can address the SDGs, it can address the NDC ambitions of South Africa in reducing our carbon emissions. If I just look at waste, for example, it's a very low contributor to carbon emissions. However, it is the one contributor of methane, which is one of the more hazardous of carbon emissions. So by reducing waste to landfill, if 90% of or 80% of our waste goes to a landfill and 60% of that is made up of organic matter, you can imagine how much emissions we're producing then. And a simple matter of then repurposing or reusing all the organic matter into composting or into a biorefinery type technology, you can take care of that 60%, which is producing the methane, and thereby reduce your carbon emissions of that particular greenhouse gas. So there are many things. CSR has completed a suite of work around looking at different sectors and understanding the opportunities within mining, within agriculture, energy, water, manufacturing. What are the circular economy opportunities? And a piece of work we are planning to undertake, which may be one of the first times it's done in the world almost, is to understand, to model with CSR the climate mitigation potential of a transition to a circular economy and how that will affect our emissions. And I think that would be it's a key piece of work that goes with our material flows work, which was presented here today. Because together with those two pieces of work, we can determine then the overall impact of a shift in our economy. And I just wanted to re-emphasize, it's not a niche economy separate to the normal economy. It's actually transitioning the current economy into one that is more circular. And I really do appreciate the support from the portfolio committee on that one as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. Just for completeness, Chair, we just want to say a few words on what's happening on special issues in agriculture. And I'll ask Dr. Maneshree Jagmohan to say a few words in about 4 minutes or so, and then I'll wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG, and good morning again to all the colleagues on the platform. Just to respond to Honorable Kachwa, sorry, I didn't pronounce your name very well, on the issues of spatial planning and human settlements. I think it's really a very important question. And for us in agriculture, of course, in terms of climate change, a lot of it is about adaptability issues the focus is not as much on mitigation. Now, drawing back, if you look at the spatial planning issues, if you look at agriculture itself, we've got 2.9 million agri households. Not necessarily all of them smallholders, but involved in some form of agriculture. And these are in provinces that have the least access to basic services, KZN, Limpopo, and the Eastern Cape. Now, in the context of climate change, whilst we are in agriculture trying to ensure that these smallholder farmers, these communities have greater access to inputs, etc., to enable them to farm efficiently, in the context of climate change, if the West is getting drier, it also impacts in terms of what should the Eastern Cape, for example, be planting. And a lot of the research work currently, whereas in the longer term, we'll be looking at how we integrate the issues of agri and hubs that look at productivity issues as well as waste management, etc., in order to promote a circular economy. In the short term, it's really about how do we ensure that there's a knowledge base, that there's scientific information to guide the adaptability of in terms of these provinces. So some of the work that we're doing, particularly if you look at Forestry, I just want to give the example of tech transfer in KZN. If we're looking at commercialization of nutrient-dense and drought-tolerant traditional crops. So in KZN, there are 5 district municipalities in terms of the district model. It's Umgungunlovo, Ugu, Harigala, and Utukela that are being considered. And we're looking at transferring and ensuring there's access to the technology in terms of amadumbe, bambara, groundnuts, and leafy vegetables from a nutrition perspective. And part of it is organizing themselves. So they formed the KwaZulu-Natal Smallholder Association. The project is at the stage where they've done the training. of the communities. And ultimately, we want to ensure that there are productive entrepreneurs who come out of this. On the second example that I want to give, DG, and I think Rebecca already alluded to it, is the issue on climate variability and the research work that needs to go into that. So there are long-term trials. We know in the Western Cape, they've got long-term rotational trials for winter crops. We've invested in long-term rotational trials for summer crops, and particularly looking at maize, sunflower, Free State, and looking at how they respond, or how the effect of heat and elevated CO2 and drought affects these crops, so that it actually allows us to develop those predictive models on how the planting dates will be impacted. It involves both conventional breeding and conservation agriculture, including cover crops, maize, soybean, sunflower, and some of this is also being done in the Free State. I want to stop there, DG. Thank you very much.
No, thanks very much, Maneshri. So, Chair, perhaps in closing, 3 comments from me. The first one is this issue of science to policy. We're still looking for the right framing for it. So this is the work that in the decadal plan would like to better understand and optimize a lot more than we have done in the 10-year plan. How and what form is going to take, we continue to work on this. We think that the structures that are being proposed, such as the IMC on science, technology, and innovation, the budget coordination, are all instruments that we need to look at a lot more in strengthening this interface. But we are very much aware that with all the good science that we're doing internationally, popular in terms of how it's feeding into the various structures, GEO, IPCC, it means that the quality of science is very good. But if it doesn't help us to solve our own problems, at the same time, we have to do something. So that's the offer that we can make to yourselves, working, of course, with the scientific community. And I do take the point that Imran is making to say how, of course, we institutionalize that and what are the financial implications of that. I think it's the detail that we will have to work out as we proceed. The second one relates to the money issue. I think Imran estimates about 700 million, and without a scientific estimation of what the return on investment is, for me, the question Honorable Letsie asked how much, Imran says is not the amount of money, says how much more should we be investing? I will continue to ask that question, but again, depending on what is the exact question that you're asking. For an example, if we've invested 70 million a year times 10, 700, what would be the cost saved of lives and, of course, the economic activities in KZN if, for instance, the science that we've been doing was provided on time and we had the modeling capability of estimating the impact of, for instance, the floods, if we know, and estimate the variability and its likely impact. So the money question can be asked in different forms, and we'll continue to keep, as I say, using the different dimensions to these things so that, as we have done with the SKA, we are aware of all the return on investment issues in investing in these scientific activities. So that's the second one. And the third one is, again, remembering that in the decadal plan, the amendment of the NRF Act around this science and public engagement is one of the things we'd like to highlight. Town hall discussions, engaging society, perhaps using that as an instrument to start shaping and changing behavior, whether it will do it, but at least creating that awareness. The ICGP calls this science in the city, where in the city, you know, there would be banners and people would be invited to come and talk about what science is saying vis-a-vis what fake news are saying, for an example. So I think we'll keep thinking about this, working with our NRF and the scientific community, because I think sometimes we're not doing justice to ourselves in terms of this capability and sharing it with the South African public that funds the work that we do. So I hope that that's a framework that is sitting on all of us, that this is not just a burden that Dr. Mjwaka likes to put to the scientific community, but it's something that we have and ought to do, and we are owing the very public that has funded us to give them that information back. So I do want to just emphasize these issues. And then on the circular economy, again, these are just transitions that we are entering into. So I would like to assure yourself, Chair, and the committee that we'll keep working on the ambition that helps us. In fact, we're calling it new source of growth within the decadal plan. So again, when it's finalized and as we engage with the others, to get to the point Honorable Yabo is raising about the ambition, we would be more than happy to come and share those with you. So those few words, again, thanks to the team that has supported us in sharing this with you. Or maybe the last point on hearing from you then, once we have put in place the mechanisms of engaging politically on some of this work and its implications. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, DG. And thank you very much to Dr. Swade and to all colleagues that were present here and presented to us as the portfolio committee on this particular matter, something we're very excited to engage on. And I think colleagues, without repeating much, what seems to be a key question, and DG, I'm quoting Dr. Patel as he quoted you. So I don't know, in terms of broken telephone, how succinct this narration of what you said will be. But if we are doing the research and the information is there, why are the people who have to know, why do the people who have to know not know of the research that we have done? And then we could even take it further, Renee, and say, and when they do know, why are they not doing anything with this particular information? And I think that for me is really key from what comes out of today's engagements. I mean, the information you've shared with us in terms of the research that you have been doing, the analyses that's being done, the monitoring, I don't know what it's called, the monitoring of what's taking place in the country, the patterns and trends globally within the continent as well. So if we're doing all this work, and I don't know, DG, where we could go to see some of the work and how the type of, I don't know, pattern analyses, I don't know what you call it, DG, forecasting, if there are data centers where all of this work takes place. It would be great for us to see, you know, how the data comes in, how it is then also translated to information that can be used by. So basically, what Dr. Swade then gives us now, you know, what process would have taken place for us to receive some of that data now. So that we have a better understanding of it, because it sounds very exciting. And I mean, of course, conversations around us saying, for example, I as we were engaging here and we were looking at the slide on the waste RDI roadmap. And I was just thinking about Joburg CBD, maybe even Durban, maybe parts of Pretoria. I don't really have a view on Cape Town as yet, but Joburg CBD definitely, when you look at the dilapidation of that city, Yeoville, Hillbrow, you know, I think it's a risk in terms of health, even in terms of, I mean, when you look at just those the slides on the waste roadmap, RDI roadmap, the burning of waste that takes place in the CBD. You know, we often associate burning of waste, maybe, I don't know, to industrial areas, to Amalokshini, Eslalini. No, like in the CBD, waste is literally being burnt. I think whatever's taking place in Joburg CBD is really a risk and a health hazard. And it would be great to know if there has been research that has been done, or if the DSI through its entities could initiate research on that regard that can really aid some sort of advocacy around an urgent intervention for our CBDs. I don't think it's okay for us as a country to just give up. I mean, it almost feels like we've given up. You know, the moment they've dilapidated to a particular state, we're like, oh, okay, well, this is what it is, and that's it. And I really have a huge problem with it. I mean, I live in Joburg, so I pass that part of town quite often, and for me, it's something that we can't normalize and say it's okay. And so if we need research to be done to say, well, here's the research, and this is why we're saying it's a risk, a health hazard, an environmental hazard, whatever a safety hazard, whatever many hazards and risks can be lifted in terms of that particular area, then let's do so. And something needs to come out of that particular research that would have been done. So for me, that also becomes really important in terms of analyzing, as we keep adding DG and saying, we need research on this, we need research on that, we need an analysis on that, we need to understand the pattern in terms of this, in terms of the capacity. I mean, can the NRF sustain the type of research that we need to be done? And I guess this is where the decadal plan and the budget coordination and earmarking of funds for research and development or for science and innovation becomes integral in terms of addressing all these various challenges that our country is faced with. So I guess there's already a solution to a problem that I was posing, but thank you very much, colleagues. What I think becomes a takeaway from this particular engagement, again, DG, is really the translation of this research to it being implemented and it having a direct impact on the decisions that are being taken by our government and the policies that we are making. So Dr. Patel, I think Dr. Swade spoke about a national adaptation strategy. Dr. Patel speaks about evidence-based policy. So, you know, there's a common theme that's there. And we need to find ways as this committee to really play a role as a motive force in this these ongoing conversations around. There's a theme, there's a common theme, and it needs to come to life at some point. You know, we need to be able to track and say, okay, the DSI did this, the DSI and its entities did this, they found this, and this is the result that it had in terms of decisions that were taken by government and you know, work that is done by government and its departments and various spheres, of course, municipalities, legislature or provinces, etc. So thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, DG. Thank you very much, Dr. Swade, DGs that are present. The young woman from the Access program, it was really great to I really think Shanaz and Renee at DG, you know, last week when we received the presentation that we received, last week was already such a long time ago. I can't remember what we dealt with last week, Friday, but there was a continuous reference to the fact that there would be, at a later stage, can the entity come in and brief the committee? So I think the way in which we did it today really aided the conversation that we're having, because we're not going back to go and get the entity to come and present to the committee, but it happened jointly as the department presented as well. And I think we need to find ways of having more committee meetings structured in this way, where the department presents, but we also are able to bring some of the entities into the meeting and to bring the people who are working, you know, so not only the CEO or the chair, but also bringing in these young people who are doing the research to be able to explain this great work that they're doing. That was a really exciting part of today's committee meeting, and we really want to thank you. That will be the end of our meeting, colleagues. The minutes will be processed next week. So that will then bring us to the end of our meeting today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Cheers all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Off the platform. He's already off the platform. Okay.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.